Ever going to get back to the old America? That's got to be the Democrats' part of the bargain. Stop coming up with radically new and often terrible ideas, and then in the next breath insist there be no debate about any of it. That if you don't see it right away and go along, you're bad, stupid, and deplorable. As if you were saying, duh, 2 + 2 = 5. Isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious you can't add. You can't just say math is racist, queers for Palestine, looting is cool, healthy at any weight. If the men's football team played the women's team, it would be a tie.
The Democratic Party has encountered a string of setbacks, and Bill Maher believes the reasons are becoming increasingly clear. On a recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, the longtime host delivered a pointed but measured analysis of why the party may be losing ground in several regions, particularly with midterm elections approaching and early discussion already shifting toward 2028. He suggested that without a serious reassessment of strategy, party leadership could face additional political challenges. According to Maher, repeating the same messaging without meaningful adjustment may carry electoral consequences. As always, consider subscribing and let's take a closer look at the broader picture.
Most liberals are insane, but neither do they make it clear they disapprove of the ones who are, and their cowardice in not marginalizing their own crazies has been their downfall. I couldn't get Neil deGrasse Tyson, a genius scientist and preeminent scientific voice in the media, to agree that it was ridiculous for Scientific American and The Atlantic to be claiming that separating sports by sex doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. Actually, it makes perfect sense. And it's obvious that it does.
Bill moves quickly to outline what he sees as a strategic weakness within the Democratic Party. From his perspective, the issue goes beyond communication style and extends to the active promotion of ideas he believes many voters view as disconnected from established science or everyday reasoning. He argues that when political leaders embrace positions perceived as overly ideological, they risk distancing the moderate voters often needed to secure electoral victories. He also expresses surprise when prominent public intellectuals become part of these discussions. Figures such as Neil deGrasse Tyson, widely recognized for promoting scientific literacy, sometimes enter debates that critics argue blur distinctions between empirical research and broader political narratives. In Maher's view, this can create uncertainty among voters who look to experts for consistency and clarity. His broader warning is that when cultural debates appear to take priority over economic and practical concerns, political leaders should not be surprised if public support plateaus and electoral momentum slows in competitive races.
And there's a lot of stuff like that on the left. And when conservatives see it, they say, I'm sorry, we're just not going to go along with reinventing society, often pointlessly, even if we have to cancel democracy to do it. That's what they're saying. They see gender as only a construct and sex is assigned at birth, and they say, we're not doing that. Transing kids by self-diagnosis with no age limit, no parental notification, and no acknowledgement of social contagion? Not doing it. Asylum now covers any reason for anyone to come to America? Not doing it.
Maher goes a step further, outlining what he believes are the underlying ideas and policy directions that may be narrowing the DNC's broader appeal. He suggests that some voters are uncomfortable with positions they interpret as efforts to revise long-established scientific or historical frameworks. From his perspective, when political messaging focuses on redefining complex subjects such as gender or social identity in ways that feel abrupt or insufficiently explained, it can generate uncertainty instead of broad agreement. He also points to ongoing debates surrounding youth gender policy, including discussions about parental roles, consent standards, and medical decision-making. In his view, these debates have moved beyond the margins and into the center of political conversation, influencing how portions of the public evaluate the party. Maher's broader concern is that emphasizing culturally polarizing issues may distance moderate voters who might otherwise align on economic or administrative priorities, potentially affecting overall electoral strength.
Natural immunity doesn't count anymore. Whiteness is toxic. Penises in women's prisons. Welcoming the Intifada. We're not doing it. And so, folks, If we are ever going to get back to the old America, that's got to be the Democrats' part of the bargain. Stop coming up with radically new and often terrible ideas, and then in the next breath, insist there be no debate about any of it.
Maher ultimately urges Democrats to reconsider their broader strategy, encouraging a move away from what he views as inflexible ideological framing and toward more open dialogue. He contends that political resilience is not built by demanding uniformity, but by permitting ideas to be openly examined, questioned, and defended. In his assessment, some voters perceive the party as becoming less tolerant of internal disagreement, creating an atmosphere where certain perspectives are amplified while others are quickly discounted or characterized negatively. He cautions that this dynamic can resemble an echo chamber, one that may motivate core supporters but risks distancing independents and undecided voters who prioritize open exchange. Maher argues that rebuilding trust and restoring electoral momentum may require engaging critics directly rather than sidelining them. From his standpoint, progress depends not on silence or strict conformity, but on transparency, constructive disagreement, and a willingness to address difficult conversations without hesitation.
See it right away and go along. You're bad, stupid, and deplorable. As if you were saying, duh, 2 + 2 = 5. Isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious you can't add. You can't just say math is racist, queers for Palestine, looting is cool, healthy at any weight. If the men's football team played the women's team, it would be a tie. You can't just say
Rhetoric from some segments of the political left has, in Maher's view, grown increasingly forceful, prompting even longtime liberals like him to voice concern. What troubles him most is the perception that certain perspectives are no longer introduced as proposals open to debate, but as conclusions expected to be accepted without challenge. He argues that when disagreement is framed as a moral shortcoming rather than a chance for discussion, it limits the open exchange that democratic systems rely on. Some observers contend this can foster an atmosphere where individuals worry about reputational consequences simply for expressing a different viewpoint. Instead of inviting thoughtful dialogue, the tone can come across as pressure to align. Maher's frustration centers on the idea that persuasion, not compulsion, is what builds durable political support. When debate narrows and one perspective dominates, some voters may feel sidelined rather than included, and that sense of exclusion can ultimately influence decisions at the ballot box.
Today have gone out of their way to post messages on social media about the current Trump administration and what's happening to American lives. The problem is they're all literally saying the same damn thing. Don't believe me? Check it out.
I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
Shh, that ain't true. That's what you just heard. Since day one of Donald Trump's presidency, prices are not down, they're up. Inflation is getting worse, not better. The prices of gross gas.
Now you see why Stephen A. Smith was in the polls as a presidential candidate? You see what I'm talking about? You see that idiocy right there? You talk about something people...
Stephen A. Smith has also outlined what he views as a strategic weakness affecting Democrats. In his assessment, consistently portraying everything Donald Trump says or does in the harshest possible terms may reduce the effectiveness of that criticism over time, particularly if voters begin to see the response as routine rather than substantive. He notes that strong opposition messaging toward Trump was evident even before he first entered the White House, yet that approach did not prevent his initial electoral success. What stands out to Smith is the sense that despite that experience, some political figures continue to rely on a similar pattern of response. Rather than centering attention on a distinct policy agenda, much of the conversation he suggests often returns to criticizing Trump's actions. Smith's broader argument is that voters tend to seek more than sustained opposition. They are looking for leadership, policy direction, and a constructive vision that extends beyond ongoing political conflict and division.
22 Democratic senators be literally echoing the same thing and think that would resonate with the American people. All it shows is that the same fabric of our democracy is unchanging. in the eyes of some of these officials, and as a result, the constituency they represent, which is why Donald Trump is in office. What, do I have to come up to Capitol Hill and give you lessons? Seriously, you don't get it? All you did, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer. Let's all get together, let's put this in a prompter, and all together, albeit in separate rooms, we'll grab a microphone and say the same damn thing. And that's what's going to resonate with the American people. And then you wonder why you're no longer in power.
Stephen A. Smith offered pointed criticism of what he describes as inconsistencies within segments of the DNC's senior leadership. From his perspective, some public responses come across as overly choreographed, structured to capture attention and shape headlines rather than produce measurable outcomes. He contends that many Americans are dealing with everyday pressures such as inflation, employment stability, and overall living costs. Yet he believes party leadership can sometimes appear more invested in symbolic positioning than in outlining clear, practical remedies. Smith maintains that voters are more attentive than they are often given credit for. In his view, people can distinguish between leaders who are actively engaging with policy challenges and those who seem focused primarily on presentation. He argues that this perceived gap contributes to public frustration and gradually weakens confidence. Rather than relying on political staging, Smith suggests that rebuilding trust may require reconnecting with voters through concrete proposals, addressing immediate concerns directly, and demonstrating credibility through consistent follow-through rather than carefully managed optics alone.
And the typical politicians, inflation is high. Oh, look at them pointing the fingers at the migrants. Oh, look at them blaming immigration. They don't care about you. Oh, by the way, they don't care about well, why would you bother people from the LGBTQ community? Why would you bother folks with transgender and all this? Why would you do that? That is what the Democrats say. That's what most politicians would say. Here's Trump. They're pieces of shit. They don't give a about you. It's rigged. They've hoodwinked you all the time. They think you're a freaking joke. They give you the anytime they want to. Here's Trump. Them. They ain't worth.
Stephen A. Smith outlines what he views as a clear difference between Donald Trump's political style and the leadership approach associated with the Democratic National Committee. In Smith's assessment, Trump's appeal is rooted in direct communication. He addresses issues in straightforward terms and signals rapid action, a style that connects with voters who prioritize decisiveness. Regardless of agreement with specific policies, Smith argues that Trump conveys a sense of clarity and intention, leaving supporters with the impression that his statements reflect his genuine position. By contrast, Smith characterizes the DNC's messaging as more strategic and carefully structured, which he believes can appear less transparent to some voters. He suggests this contrast contributes to skepticism, particularly among individuals who value candor in political leadership. For Smith, authenticity functions as a form of political capital. He contends that voters often gravitate toward leaders perceived as plain-spoken, while communication that feels overly managed or indistinct may gradually erode trust and credibility.
You know what his followers say? Yeah, that's how we want you talking to those politicians who've been stealing our money all of these years. It's not what he says. It's how he says it. He does it with vitriol and venom to show a disrespect to politicians who the public have no respect for because they feel they've been hoodwinked by those same politicians. He's using it to separate himself from the cesspool that is Capitol Hill. And how does Capitol Hill respond? By showing them they're still Capitol Hill.
Stephen A. Smith contends that Bill Maher recognizes a dynamic that many elected officials underestimate, a broad sense of frustration among voters. Toward the political establishment, Maher channels that sentiment by publicly questioning leaders, institutions, and policy decisions he believes warrant examination, often using direct and unfiltered commentary. His readiness to critique figures across the political spectrum connects with audiences who feel their concerns are frequently diluted or overlooked in more traditional political messaging. Smith argues that this posture gives Maher a distinct edge. By positioning himself as willing to challenge authority regardless of party lines, that, Maher reinforces an image of independence. In contrast, Smith suggests that the DNC can at times appear measured or overly cautious, which some voters may interpret as uncertainty rather than confidence. He maintains that in a climate marked by skepticism, clarity and assertiveness tend to resonate more strongly. For Smith, the takeaway is straightforward. Direct engagement and perceived authenticity can capture attention and help restore credibility with voters who feel politically disengaged.
See me on The View Tuesday afternoon? Did you see when they said, "We don't believe there's a Trump mandate"? I said, "Oh, really?" Did you see the former press secretary for the White House come on? "I think Stephen A. is wrong. I don't believe what he said is correct. Donald Trump has the lowest approval ratings in the first month or so, or the 2 months of a presidency in American history." Oh, really? But didn't he win all the swing states? Didn't his popularity elevate within 89% of the counties in the United States of America? Didn't his popularity elevate within the Black community, the Hispanic community, and the young voters?
Taken together, the observations from Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith suggest significant challenges for the Democratic National Committee. Although they come from different professional backgrounds, both identify what they see as a similar underlying concern. They describe a perceived disconnect between party leadership and segments of the electorate. In their view, many voters are seeking transparency, clarity, and practical solutions rather than messaging that appears overly ideological, highly theatrical, or driven by constant confrontation. At the same time, they argue that Donald Trump's appeal is linked to his projection of decisiveness and perceived authenticity, regardless of whether critics agree with his positions. Maher and Smith caution that if Democrats are seen as dismissing dissent, limiting open debate, or relying too heavily on optics, they could face continued electoral challenges. They contend that voters can distinguish between firmly held convictions and carefully calculated messaging. For both commentators, the proposed remedy centers on listening more closely, encouraging open engagement, and rebuilding trust before dissatisfaction becomes long-term at the ballot box. And with that, we conclude today's discussion. If you found this analysis valuable, consider liking the video and subscribing for more content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.